Favored versus weighted compositions. What does that mean? Let's just say we had two characters talking. You would generally be shooting things like, let's say, over the shoulders. So you could have one character here and the camera's looking over their shoulder, and you have another character over here and they're talking to each other, right? This, what I just drew, would be considered a weighted composition because you're using the length of the screen to place your characters. Now, when you do the next cut, let's just give this guy a hat to make it easier to understand here. Now, when you cut to the reverse, you could maintain your weighted composition. You could have a hat guy over here and bald guy over here. So again, this is what I would consider weighted compositions because you're using the full scope of the screen. Personally, I prefer favored compositions, and I will show you the difference and I'll show you why. A favored composition would be you still want to maintain left and right like we're doing here, but you bring the information closer to the center. Again, let's say we're doing it over the shoulder. I would put this guy here and I would put hat guy here and they're talking to each other. So now on the cut, you could maintain what I would consider a favored composition. You could have hat guy here in the foreground now because we're looking over his shoulder, and you could have bald guy who is very mad at what he just said or whatever, maybe he called him bald. In both of these versions, I've still maintained left and right with these characters, except I've used the internal space here on the favored composition, and on the weighted, I've pushed them and I'm using more of the scope of the screen. What happens on cuts when you have weighted compositions is if this guy's talking here where this red dot is, our eye's going to go here. Our eye is drawn to faces, contrast, and to movement. So if this guy's moving and talking, our eye's going to go over here. Now on the cut, because we have a weighted composition, our eye is going to pop over here to the other side of the screen. And so your eye is going to travel, if you imagine these two shots overlaid, from there to there. And it's a long way for your eye to travel, especially when you're watching things on a big screen. And what that means is essentially you're making the audience do work. You're making the eyes do work to follow along. When you have favored compositions like below, your eye on this shot where he's talking is going to be right here. And then on the cut, your eye is going to be right here. And if you look at the difference between that, that's how far your eye has to travel. You essentially keep the audience's eye in the same spot so they have to do less work to follow along. So again, it's the difference between that or that, hopping that far across cuts.